Hello everyone, Professor Thompson here. It is June 4th, 2018, and I have some announcements for all of my summer internet sections. First off, I apologize. I'm very stuffed up. My allergies are getting to me today, so I'm going to sound a little bit different. I've got several different issues and emails and answers and updates on the speech for Unit 1. And then I also have a couple textbook and course announcements, updates, reminders as well. So I'm going to first start with the speech aspect, or the presentation number 1, questions, concerns, updates, and then I'll move into the course stuff here in a few minutes. So I got an email over the weekend that asked about PowerPoint for the upcoming speech. And really what I want to say is, you're not required to use PowerPoint for the first speech. If you want to use PowerPoint, you can. You are supposed to use some sort of visual aid. If you go to the Handouts tab in Blackboard, there is a handout that talks about visual aids. And one of the things that it will do is right away list about 17 different kinds of visual aids. Pictures, graphs, charts. Yes, you can use technology. PowerPoints, video graphics, electronic charts, videos. But you also have to adapt to your environment. If your venue that you've chosen is a park, PowerPoint just doesn't make sense. Or if you're in a library, maybe again, PowerPoint doesn't make sense. Maybe you need to go with a handout. Maybe you need to go with a big photo. So you need to make sure that you're adapting your visual aid choice to the venue that you're using, but then also your audience. Remember that your visual aid that you use is meant to enhance and extend whatever point you're trying to make. So that if you are using a handout, you need to refer to that handout. You need to talk about it as part of your actual speech. You need to make sure that your audience that's there watching you can see it. If it's just on a laptop that's flipped up, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because that's really hard for everybody to see, no matter what size the audience is. So you need to use some critical thinking here. Just because you're recording a speech and submitting it electronically doesn't mean that you need to put less thought into that visual aid or how that comes off. So again, be strategic. Look at the handout that I provided you in the Handouts tab. Think about this. What can I do to make my speech stronger for the 8, 10, 12 people that are there watching my speech? And then naturally, as you record it, that should come across in the video, and I should see that you're integrating that visual aid. Okay, one of the other questions that I got this weekend has to do with the audience. First off, gathering the audience. Some of you have concerns about reaching the 8 people required. I want to stress that the 8 people, that's a state requirement. You have to have 8 people. It's not a Steve Thompson, it's not a College of DuPage, it's a state of Illinois requirement. You have to have 8 people. So think about that. Use coworkers, use friends. I do know that there is a student in my Speech 1100 Net 15 section. His name is David. David sent out an email to the other students in the Net 15 class asking about, is anyone interested in meeting? David's email, I'm going to give this to everybody because this video goes to 4 different classes. His email is franz251 at dupage.edu. I'm going to say that again. franz251 at dupage.edu. So his name is David Franz, or David Franz. Sorry if I messed that up, David. But he is trying to coordinate to see if anybody is interested in meeting to get together to give the speeches for Unit 1. So maybe by having that email and me using this video for 4 different sections, that might help some of you out in creating the audience aspect. if you do coordinate with a few people in class, it becomes pretty quick, right? If I'm in the class and I'm going to show up and I bring one friend or I bring two friends and two or three other people do that, we have 8 people pretty quickly. I had a follow-up email on that said, hey, and it was from Clara. Clara's in a different class, and she's in my Net 01 section. Clara asked if I could give some examples of venues and some examples of audiences before. So let me do that for everybody in this video. First off, the venue. The state of Illinois just says that it has to be a public venue. And the households are not a public venue, right? I mean, we consider those private residences. So the idea, if you use the lens of what the state is trying to say, and I'm actually a part of that state panel, so I get to listen to these conversations all the time. The goal is that you are out in public. So you got to think about that lens. It's called public speaking. How are you out in public? How are you addressing people outside of your private residence? So that's the lens you got to think of that the state is coming from. So you can use things like outdoor amphitheaters. You can use classrooms in middle schools, elementary schools, high schools, public libraries, movie theaters, train stations, conference rooms, boardrooms, public pavilions, farmers markets, baseball stadiums, airports. You just can't use your house as a venue. The example that I gave Clara when I responded to her email this morning was, I've had a variety of different things. I had a student, and I like sharing this one. I had a student who, female student, her brother played for LSU, Louisiana State, and her brother's baseball team was really good. They made the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska. So as the good sister and good family member that she was, her and her whole family went out to watch her brother play in Nebraska. But she was in my internet class. And so for her first speech, unit number 1, she went to the LSU tailgate before the game that her brother was playing in. And she told the tailgate what was happening. She explained that she had to give a speech. It was going to be 5 to 7 minutes. And she recorded on her phone her giving a speech at the LSU tailgate to friends, family, and probably about 200 LSU fans that were eating hot dogs and brats and ribs and drinking beer, but they were paying attention to her. It wasn't like they were milling around and they were just kind of in the background. They were like intensely watching her give this speech. And then when she finished, there was a huge eruption, a huge roar. It was actually very, very cool to see. And they were, she was smiling and they were raising their glasses, and it was cool. Well, then we got to Unit 2, and in Unit 2, her brother's team was still winning in the College World Series. They kept advancing. So for speech 2, she actually went into the stadium and she went to the bottom of the section. So imagine you were at, Wrigley Field or Guaranteed Rate Field for a White Sox game, and you walked down to section 132, and she went down to the front of that section and she told the people what she had to do, and they filmed her in the stadium at the bottom of one of those sections addressing, 75, 100 people of that section who, again, were watching her give the speech before this baseball game even started. So you can be creative in what kind of venues you use, but it has to be some sort of public venue. Again, it could be a clubhouse, it could be a boardroom, a conference room, but you can think outside the box. All right. The other thing is, when it comes to your audience, you have to have 8 or more people. Again, this is kind of a non-negotiable type of thing. And part of that comes from the theory of public speaking and the theory of communication. In communication, we often think of small group communication to be 3 people to 8 people, and we see that public speaking begins at 8. So it's very common to hear that public presentations start with a minimum of 8 people. So maybe you need to get creative. Maybe you need to phone in some favors. Maybe you need to ask some coworkers, some friends, or if you want, there's that function down at the bottom, send an email to your internet classmates. Again, I gave you an email earlier in this video of someone from one of my internet sections trying to gather people. But I would start preparing this now. Your speech is due on June 11th, and so you want to make sure you're working in advance. Okay, so those are some public speaking types of reminders, announcements, and whatnot. I have 2 that are just kind of course related. I had a student email and ask about quiz values and accessing quizzes. When you are in a unit, the first link for a chapter is for the chapter reading and for the chapter practice. It's that module. By just completing the module, it's 20 points. You have to answer the flashcards. That is adaptive learning technology. So if you miss a couple, it's not a big deal, but you just got to keep answering those flashcards until it's all completed. The more questions you get right, the less flashcards you get. The more you get wrong, the more you get it, because the system thinks you need to continue learning. You actually have to access the quiz by going into the unit from Blackboard, and you click on the second link that says like Chapter 1 quiz. That's the way that you go to the quiz. Every quiz is worth 20 points. It doesn't matter how many questions there are. There could be 5 questions, and each question would be 4 points apiece, or there could be 20 questions, and they're 1 point apiece. But every quiz is 20 points. So that way in the grade book, you see that every module is 20 points and every quiz is 20 points. There's consistency, okay? The second question that I got from someone is, what is recharge? Okay, so recharge is really meant for a course where you have a midterm or a final. So in my class, I do chapter assessments and that's it. But let's say that I had a midterm or a final and it was cumulative, you might want to go back and recharge or review the information from those previous chapters that you've done to prepare for that midterm or final. For me, I care that you read and that you assess yourself for the chapter. And then really for me, I want to see you apply or implement those readings into your speeches. I'm not going to give you a midterm and I'm not going to give you a final on top of everything else. Okay? So you don't have to worry about the recharge. Your goal is to do the actual practice module and then take the quiz, and that's it. Okay? All right, so this was a little bit longer video, just over 13 minutes, but plenty of good information. Sorry again that I'm all stuffed up. If you have questions or concerns, please email me, and we will see you all very soon.